Hi, RIISE. It's Gina. We're back again with another lunch with Gina. As you know, there's a big event coming up on Saturday, April 23rd. It's the 5th annual RIISE Parent Power Conference, part book launch of the second installment of RIISE Roadmap. School fair, 16 fabulous schools so far, and I don't even think we have room for more. And then workshops, great workshops for parents that are currently enrolled in independent schools, as well as those who are curious and want to learn more about it and meet some dynamic folks. So that's April 23rd. In the details section of this video, you'll find the link for more details and to register. And we want to just say that we're super excited, not only for the schools that are going to be there, but the thought leaders that'll be there. And you've met some of them thus far this week with Lunch with Gina. And today we have Rashidah Bowen White. Say hi, Rashidah.
Hello, everyone.
Rashidah and I, we meet some really amazing folks in this RIISE network as we build bridges between families of color and the culture of independent schools. And we're always so thankful and we feel blessed when these thought leaders find us, we find them, and they can support our school choice for excellence, particularly in independent school education. So Rashidah is a counselor, upper school counselor at the town school. She is currently a Ph.D. candidate at Columbia, where her focus is racial socialization. That's a big intersection. And please join in, Rashidah. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it's great to find someone who's as passionate about this conversation as you are. Academically, most of our kids of color are doing great, the normal struggles. But when you're in these environments, and you can talk more to what these environments look like, Rashidah, there is that socialization, that social and emotional development that's important for middle school and upper school anyway. But when you add that layer of racial socialization to it, it's just something that we as parents really need to stay on top of. And be able to connect, listen to our kids, and support them and guide them as they adults, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when we think about the schooling process and educational process that children go through, it should be a holistic one. And so certainly we want our kids to master the concepts in math and reading and writing and science. We want them to feel grounded in that work, but a big part of school is developing strong interpersonal skills, understanding yourself and self in relation to others, developing conflict resolution skills with your peers, to feel as though you have a healthy sense of self identity and that you are being honored in your school environment and that you are being validated by your teachers and your peers. So much of the development that happens, and that I think as educators we want to, or we strive to facilitate, is social and emotional growth. And one of the things that I think is key for parents of color to keep in mind, and quite frankly, not just parents of color, but we talk to our teachers and administrators about the importance of keeping in mind, is the overall personal identity development that happens for all of our children, but particularly for those children of color who are a part of a racial minority in independent schools. And that is just the nature of these organizations. I think that independent schools do a great deal of trying to diversify both their student body and the faculty and staff. It doesn't mean, though, that our children aren't going to encounter situations or an experience that's going to require some support from parents, from teachers, from staff on how to navigate schools like these independent schools. And when we talk about parents and socializing their children, especially around racial socialization, it's something that people of color and parents of color have been doing for years, instilling a sense of racial and ethnic.
That's very natural.
Yeah, exactly.
Very natural.
So parents are already doing this work. You know, you're talking to your children about your racial and ethnic pride, and talking about cultures and traditions, and you know, that's all been happening probably since, you know, your children came out of the womb. You've been socializing them in this way. For many people of color, particularly Black and Latino parents, some of it is preparing their children for certain biases and discrimination that they may face, and doing so in a way that's developmentally appropriate. And that's true for more than just our Black and Latino parents, across the board for parents of color. But it's certainly, that's also part of the racial socialization pieces, you know, giving them a strong, healthy sense of who they are as a racial cultural being, and also preparing them in a developmentally appropriate way for what they may encounter both in their smaller communities and in the world at large.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're part of that facilitation in our schools, and you're part of that facilitation with RIISE, because on Saturday at the RIISE Parent Power Conference, we're really happy and thrilled to have you facilitate one of the workshops called Socialization, how students and families of color, you know, navigate independent schools. And we're going to be exploring a lot of intersections of how racial socialization can play out, and how parents can be there to support their children, empower them, how they can connect with their particular social networks in doing so. So let me just go through the outline that you put together for us, because it looks amazing.
Okay.
We're going to explore parents' own school experience. And we talk about that in the first installment of RIISE Roadmap, how it was so different for my husband and I than our children. I went to public and Catholic, and he went to strictly public school. So we're going to take a look at that. Can you touch a little bit on how our own experiences as parents can influence what our expectations are for our children, and how that shapes their hopes and dreams too?
Absolutely. I mean, you made a great point. I think about my own experience. I went to an independent school growing up, but my parents, particularly my father, who grew up in Atlanta, went to the public school, and they were segregated at that time. And so, you know, I remember him talking about what going to school was like when he was growing up. And same for my mother, who grew up just outside of Cleveland, and the schools were integrated, but they had different experiences. And so part of what we do as parents is that we think back to what our experiences were like in school. And for better or for worse, it helps to shape what we want for our children. We think, you know what, I didn't really feel integrated into my school community. It was a great big school. I felt like I was one of just, you know, a ton of kids. I didn't have connections with my teachers. My guidance counselor didn't think I could go to college. There are all of these experiences that we've had, and quite frankly, I think for many people of color, some of our experiences have been scarring. I think a lot of times when you think about just the educational system in our country, our students of color are often at a disadvantage, and not because they don't come into the building with the organic intellect to be able to perform. But it's the resources, it's the schools and expectations, the biases, even in expectations about what is underestimated what Black and Latino children. Absolutely. And we can point to a ton of research that looks at how the teacher's bias towards a student has such a significant impact on their academic performance. And you know, that carries with the child for quite some time. You know, when we think about the nature of our public school system and how public schools are designed, and in terms of who attends certain public schools and who attends others, and the resources that are allocated to those schools, it ends up putting, I think, a lot of our people of color at a great disadvantage. And so I think that, as adults, we come, even if we haven't experienced this ourselves, we know just from understanding the way in which the world works, how important a the right school environment is for the overall development of our sons and daughters. So I think that it's important for, as a therapist, I always think it's important to do a little bit of self-reflection and think, what is motivating my decision to want to send my child to these types of schools? What's behind that? What is it that I experienced that was either great or perhaps not so great that I don't want my child to experience, or I do want my child to experience? What do I know about the world in which we live in that's an important factor in my decision to want to send my child to an independent school? So I just always think it's great for parents to think about their own experience in school and maybe the messages that they got from their own parents and grandparents about school and the educational process.
Yeah, you know what? And knowing that too is really what we have to fall back on as parents when it does become a little challenging, and we ask ourselves when we run into that roadblock, because it's going to happen, whether it's about dating. Yes, I said it. I mean,
yes,
honestly, that's a part of, development, when there's a disparity in culture and ethnicity and race. What does that mean? What is it? We usually just tell our kids, don't worry about that. You're not supposed to be dating anyway. You're supposed to be studying. That's not reality. What do you do when you're in the classroom and a subject comes up, let's say about slavery, and you're challenged by your peers in your class by, if at one point in time there were more slaves than there were, enslaved than there were slave owners. Why do you just revolt? That type of thing, not really willing to go in depth and figure out that whole psychological piece.
Right.
But that's the other part. So then you have the curriculum itself that you may find challenging as well. Are our schools teaching from an ethnocentric point of view too often? Right? So there's so many things that we have to pay attention to in finding that right school fit. But oftentimes, these things that I just described are a little insidious, and you don't know it until you bump up on it, right? And so how do you identify the schools that would be a good fit for you and that they can support you when you do hit those roadblocks? So I always think about affinity groups.
Exactly. I think, as a parent, identifying these schools, in addition to just assessing your own values for what you want a school to represent and your own desires, it's also looking at, do these schools kind of meet some of the needs of the children of color and families of color, quite frankly? So are there affinity groups? I would definitely ask those questions. Now more and more independent schools are having affinity groups for faculty and staff too, to talk about the experiences of being a person of color, or in some instances, a part of the LGBT population. To have a place to talk about certain things, to have a place also to, when appropriate, to communicate to the administration about not only the needs of faculty and staff, but what needs to be done for our students, because we've been through it and we know, and so it's been nice to have those faculty groups as well. I know schools are moving in that direction, so certainly affinity groups. I would also ask about the curriculum. Do you uphold the importance of having a curriculum throughout the school that is culturally responsive? How do you make sure that you are looking at diverse and multiple perspectives when it comes to history and literature, going in the libraries and looking to see what books are not only in the shelves, but on display and are book talked, and the authors that are invited to come speak, not just during, certain months of the school year, but throughout. Those are some things that I'm always curious about. What sorts of parent organizations are in existence at the school? Is there a parent group for parents of color? That more and more schools have parent groups for parents with adoptive children, or a parent group for the LGBT population. So these things are happening throughout independent, or these groups are formed throughout many independent schools. And so I think it's important to know, or to assess and identify whether the school has some of these things and whether they really value multiculturalism and diversity, and are making an intent.
Right. I think that's a great indicator to see how serious the school is about, really, when it comes down to it, it's social justice issues, it's racial issues, it's and it's all part of that mission statement. It's in there somewhere, you know.
Yes.
So schools are really expecting that during the admissions process, that you can really get to understand the focus of the community, of the school community, and its responsiveness to diversity, which brings on creativity and, you know, success. You just go, it goes on and on. And so these are the things that we'll talk about on the 23rd during your workshop. We're really excited about it. We just want to make sure that we prepare students for, and families for, independent school experience as a whole. We know that the rigor is there, but you should also know that there's a lot of rigor when it comes to self-identity and building it, and making sure that that support system is there for you inside and outside of the school, making sure you have those outside networks as well. And we actually want to validate these experiences that our students have, and not say, oh, don't worry, you know, you're only there for 4 years, you know, it'll pass, or, you know, you're there for one thing and one thing only. No, it's a full experience. We want to make sure that our students are validated for this unique experience and are able to identify support.
Yes, exactly. And that's a key piece to pay attention to when you're looking in, you know, for the appropriate school for your child, is, you know, who are the people around that are going to be there to support families and also students as well. Who are your cheerleaders? Who are the people that are trying to, you know, continue to push this cause forward? Or this issue?
But on an up note, because I sometimes, you know, I don't think we even like to kind of admit that this is one aspect of this educational experience, because on the one hand, we're telling families of color, come, you know, join our community. We need you. That's how we shift these numbers. But at the same time, I think that our schools are a micro of a macro situation, and you really clearly get to see a lot of social justice issues and disparities because it's predominantly white and wealthy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we just have to be able to acknowledge that. And but the thing is that that's the fun part of it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? You have a voice for social justice in our schools. Not only do the missions, as I mentioned, go towards that, but many of the administration are putting the bottom line with diversity initiatives. They're putting it out there. They're having the great speakers. They're talking about the tough things. And as parents, as families, we can join that conversation. So I feel very active as a parent in an independent school about making this very private space a very public mission and a very public driven opportunity to make change in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we thank you again for facilitating our work on Saturday. And we have something going on at Brooklyn Friends School at the end of the month, and where we're going to be talking to students. Now, on the 23rd, students and parents really should be in the room. Even if you're currently enrolled, there's something to pick up and get a resurgence from. And if you're curious about independent schools, you should be in that room as well. And we're going to do something at Brooklyn Friends specifically, though, for the students. This is an opportunity for them to be heard, to be validated, to share what their coping skills are. We're going to also find out what their needs are and how we can better support them. So, Rashidah, I'm excited.
Yes, me too.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. Yes, I'm excited.
All right, perfect. All right, RIISE. So we'll see you on Saturday the 23rd, but check back. There's going to be a lot more lunch with Gina's, from our sponsors, from our different thought leaders that will participate with us on April 23rd. Register today for the event. and share it, okay? Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon, Rashidah.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.